Hello, and welcome to another edition of East of Ethnia. What I want to talk to you about this week is the big story this week in the news in Serbia, which is the abandonment of this investment project for a hotel in Belgrade. Here is the deal. Um, there is a building. This is a building that was heavily damaged in bombing in the NATO campaign of bombing against Serbia in 1999. It was the headquarters of the military, or as it's called popularly, the Generalštab. That's a nice, authentic Slavic word. Um, but it had been standing in ruins for the last 26 years when Donald Trump became was elected as president of the United States for another time. Uh, a deal was reached with a company chaired by his son-in-law, Affinity Partners. This is a company building various projects around the world with money principally from the investment fund, the state investment fund of Saudi Arabia. They had intended to build a hotel on the site, that is, to destroy the Generalstab, build a large luxury hotel on the site at a cost of about $500 million, so a pretty large investment. Uh, what were some of the problems with this? Well, one of the problems with it is that the site of the old military headquarters, the Generalstab, has been declared as an architectural monument. And should it be declared an architectural monument? Well, probably objectively it should. It's the only surviving building in Belgrade by Nikola Dobrović, a very meaningful modernist architect. He had built buildings primarily in other places, not a lot of which are standing. Having said that, there was a lot of manipulation around the status of this building. And one of the reasons why it was declared a monument in the first place was the idea there were people who wanted the ruins of the building to remain standing for as long as possible, basically for propaganda purposes. But on balance, it's an architecturally important building worth preservation if there's an interest in preservation. What were the goals of the project? Well, first of all, there's this company chaired by Donald Trump's son-in-law, um, funded with capital from Saudi Arabia. That is to say, it was a money laundering project in order to assist Donald Trump's son-in-law with his partners in Saudi Arabia, and it was also probably a project to try to buy loyalty and closeness for the Serbian regime with the administration of Donald Trump in the United States. So there are some both financial and political goals on different sides. But what has happened with it? Basically, what the regime needed to do was to remove the protected architectural status of this building in order to allow for it to be demolished for the hotel project. And they did it, but they did it through illegal means by falsifying documents and so on. And the prosecutors, surprisingly enough, have reacted to this. And so several people, including the current Minister of Culture, who's like an old lion of the Serbian Radical Party, the less said about that character, the better, have been faced with criminal charges. That is to say, there have been a lot of developments, including the unpopularity of the project, that have meant that the project is not likely to get off the ground. Um, and uh, and this means that very suddenly the company Affinity Partners announced that it was withdrawing from the project. There would be no demolition of the building. There would be no hotel built on this site. And what is happening behind this? Well, probably a couple of things. One of them is that because of the uncertain status and uncertain legitimacy of the regime in Serbia, it looks like international actors are distancing themselves from it. And these international actors probably include things like the thing that operates as a government in the United States now, and probably also the investors from Saudi Arabia. But at the same time, we find that this company run by Trump's son-in-law, Affinity Partners, was withdrawing from another adventure, an attempt to buy the Warner Brothers media company, leading to speculation that this company might be failing itself and that they're finding ways to cut their losses. In any case, the decision was made to abandon the project, and the response on the part of the regime has been anger. How do I mean anger? I mean that on the first day after the project was cancelled, the response was to make threats. The president of the republic, Alexander Vučić, said that he would personally file criminal charges against people who contributed to the abandonment of the project. So threats there. I mean, not only threats, but also insults. There was a very highly charged conference for the press, in which the president directly attacked several journalists, including the journalists from the one independent television station, N1 and Yedan, as it's called. Just today, the former prime minister, who continues to have some sort of role, he's no longer prime minister, but maintains a prominent media presence, said that the people who contributed to the abandonment of the project were idiots. That's what he called them, idiots. And he said that they were trying to destroy Serbia. And national hatred has come into the response as well. So the argument has been made that this investment that was going to go to Serbia is now going to go to Albania. This, by the way, is untrue. There is another project in Albania in which they want to take one island, Sazan. It's the only island in Albania, a former military base. So they're doing this with military properties and build a luxury resort there. But this project is being developed independently of the project in Belgrade. It was approved Albanian parliament in 2024, and the project is very controversial in Albania as well because of the character of the political connections, just like in Serbia, and because this land is also protected land. It is a former military base, but it is now a wildlife refuge. So what happens next? Well, there's a bit of speculation. I mean, one bit of speculation is that Trump's son-in-law could demand some kind of compensation for the failure of the project, which would create this really scandalous situation in which poor countries are paying money to individuals who are already rich in rich countries. Another bit of speculation is that a new investor could appear to continue the project, but I don't think it's likely that a new investor will appear. I mean, I don't think there's a lot of motivation for anybody to come and join in on a project that's already been found to be illegal, particularly in an unstable regime where it's not clear that the people who are protecting the investment will be around to continue protecting it in a year or so. The other thing that happens is I think this contributes to the ongoing tension that has been very high throughout the country since the beginning of the student and citizen protests in November last year in response to corruption that is not unrelated. And this tells us something too about the environment for foreign investment in a state with a regime that is weak in legitimacy, authoritarian in its tactics, and unstable. So, what can we say about this generally? Well, it looks like the failure of this project is one more in a series of failures that we've seen over the last month for President Alexander Vučić and for his regime. So already, I think the failure of the legitimacy of the regime as a result of over a year of protests is nearly complete. Similarly, the failure of the European prospects of the regime has become more or less complete. So right at the time when Albania was opening up new clusters in negotiations for accession with the European Union, the report on the European Commission on the status and on the progress of Serbia has been so negative that to the last summit on European accession, summit for candidate countries in Brussels, Serbia simply decided not to send a representative. They boycotted the meeting, meant to be a show of strength, but it's a show of failure. And this comes at the same time when another crisis is being sparked by Serbia being compelled to remove from Russian control the controlling interest in its principal energy country. So this is another illustrative moment in the story of a regime that is falling apart very slowly. We don't know when it's going to fall apart completely, but we do know this. We know that the continuation of the falling apart of the regime is going to be accompanied by threats, by insults, by violence, and by anger. So one more case in this instance with an international dimension. Thank you for your time and attention, and we'll talk to you again soon.